Hey, this is Todd Nelson again. My YouTube name is Millenium Gray, it's my band name. I did a video recently on the Mandela Effect, and I got some backlash from it, and I got some positive comments, but I have some specific instances of what people call the Mandela Effect that I would like to address, such as Curious George not having a tail. If you Google cartoon monkeys, notice how many cartoon monkeys there are that look like Curious George that don't have tail. I mean, that do have tails. Um, I think that kind of should give people pause for thought right there. Um, all this talk of this supposed phenomenon or conspiracy or whatever people think it is has prompted me to really consider the thoughts about memory and how they're stored. And I remembered a book that I read back in I think the book's from the 80s called The Memory Book. It's by Harry Lorraine and Jerry Lucas, and one of the things that they emphasized in this book were that people don't really forget much. Usually they don't store the memories properly or correctly. Um, this guy, Harry Lorraine, could look through a magazine and 30 minutes later tell you where like everything was in the book, the pictures on the page, and like what they were basically pictures of. I mean, this guy had a phenomenal memory. He was banned from casinos because he could memorize cards so well and things like that. He just had an amazing system of memory, but that was one of the things he mentioned, is that things aren't usually properly remembered, not so much they aren't that they're forgotten. One of the main points of their method for improving your memory would be to link things in an exaggerated way, either an exaggerated amount or some kind of aspect that was exaggerated about these things. And if you think about these, quote, Mandela effects, a lot of them have to do with that type of thing. For instance, Sinbad, supposedly being a genie movie in the 90s. Sinbad was a hot comic in the 90s. Sinbad was an Arabic legend, and so was Aladdin, which had a genie in it, Robin Williams. And there was another genie movie out around that time, I think, called Shazam or something like that. I don't know who was in it. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. There were a lot of things around that time. You could see how those things could get confused, especially if people weren't really paying attention to the details of those things. It's kind of like the thing about Stephen Biko. Well, somebody commented on the video saying they never even heard of Stephen Biko. But everybody's heard of Nelson Mandela. And so if you saw something back in the day when you weren't really maybe studying apartheid or things like that, that was similar to Nelson Mandela's story, but this guy had died, and maybe you just saw it in passing on television, it'd be easy to misstore that memory. I think a lot of people did. I think that's what most of these things are, and just because a lot of people remember something differently doesn't mean it was different before. There are so many holes in this theory, or this conspiracy theory, that is almost ludicrous to me. The other thing, let me see, many of the differences are slight differences, like there's an S missing off of a word, or a different form of a verb, or a different spelling, like the Febreze thing. Febreze, most people, when they hear Febreze, they think of a breeze, like a wind. Well, a breeze, like a wind, does have two E's in the middle, and so if you never really looked at the label, you'd probably just kind of assume that. It's not some kind of major mystery. Missung or altered lyrics, like the what would you do if I sang out of tune, or what would you say if I sang out of tune, or what would you think if I sang out of tune. Misquoted lyrics, even by the same artist, Ringo Starr, singing his own song with different lyrics, is not really that strange. I write songs, and sometimes I sing my lyrics differently. It just kind of depends on when I'm singing, how it comes to mind. It's not that strange. It's kind of like the Luke, I am your father. I think many people have heard that quoted from like maybe comedy sketches, or just people talking about they like the movie and they misquoted it. So when they hear people misquote it so many times, it just kind of sticks as that's what it was. And it kind of encapsulates what he was talking about at that moment. But, the movie obviously said, no, I am your father. Well, big whoop. It's just somebody misremembering something. It just seems obvious to me. mirror, mirror on the wall thing, I think that one's the one that really gets people, you know, that it said magic mirror, whatever. But strangely enough, nobody seems to be taken aback that the thing was called a magic mirror and that they referred to it as the magic mirror. Just because she may have chanted it differently in some other retellings of the story. I mean, come on. I think sometimes I think maybe people are making money off these YouTube videos, and so they propagate. I've seen this with conspiracy theories where they'll put something out there that starts with a false premise, and they'll just edit their videos to take out information so you only see part of the information, and it totally skews the meaning of what they were saying in the video. The prime example of that was where they were talking to Larry Silverstein about 9/11 buildings, and they were saying that he wanted to pull the building to have it destroyed. But if you hear the whole interview, it talks about he was talking about pulling a battalion of firefighters out of the building so they wouldn't get killed or something like that. But they don't want you to see the proper context because their videos don't sell with their sensationalism and all that type of thing. A lot of the 9/11 conspiracies are like that, and a lot of conspiracy theories in general are structured in a way to only give you part of the information and to harden your reasoning off so that you won't listen to other information that could possibly disprove it, and to only let in certain information is really that's a phenomenon. That's a crazy phenomenon, how people can do that, how they can seal off anything that doesn't agree with what they've already decided is true. And even, you know, I guess they call it cognitive dissonance or whatever, but it's that's an amazing thing. Anyways, one time I had a relative tell me that about an experience we had when we were younger that I totally don't remember, but the experience had to do with him and a girl that he was involved with, and she obviously made an impression on him. She didn't make an impression on me that much because I wasn't intimately involved with her. So that's kind of an example of how if a memory isn't strong, if it doesn't have a deep connection to you in some way, then you don't really store it properly. This one-sided circular logic gets me. I mean, physicists that work at CERN say that this Mandela Effect is that we are not in a parallel universe. This is just some kind of imaginative fiction. And you can look up an article on that by Michelle Castillo on CNBC, I think it was. Google that, and you know, they don't believe in it. So I guess maybe the Illuminati conspiracy would have you believe that it isn't true or something. But I don't mean to mock so much, but in a way I kind of do, because I mean, I like conspiracy theories. I've looked at them for a long time. I've read David Icke's stuff and all this, and I find that a lot of it has some true facts, but it's kind of built upon into this extravagant fable a lot of times. And maybe he's sincere, maybe a lot of these people are sincere, but I do know there are a huge chunk of them that aren't sincere, that are intentionally leaving information out. So I would say research both sides of things. And this is, somebody made a comment on one of my videos. They said, well, if you had done your research, you would think like I do. Well, that's pretty arrogant. You know, you don't know what I've researched or not researched, you know, and I've looked at a lot of the same information you have. Just because I drew a different conclusion does not mean, you know, maybe I'm just thinking, putting more information with it than you are, but you're assuming that you know more than I do. I don't claim to be the end all be all, and this is just my opinion. People can take it or leave it, but in my opinion, a lot of people are blocking out information that doesn't agree with what they want it to be. Another thing that really bugs me about people blocking out certain information is that they get so overly emotional about the thing that they won't even allow other information in for consideration. That's a scary thing, because it's never in history been a good thing when people do that, when they block out all alternative avenues of information. I think just to get a well-rounded picture, I would say research all areas of a subject, and if it holds, then it holds. If it doesn't, it doesn't, but be honest about things. Anyway, thanks, and hope you enjoyed the video. Subscribe, respond, whatever. Thank you.